In the Practice Makes Perfect update to Dead Cells, Evil Empire put in a couple of lore rooms that are described as a hint to what's coming. This is obviously a not-so-subtle wink towards a third, and perhaps final DLC pack coming to the game. One that should hopefully answer some of the outstanding questions we have about the lore and the story of Dead Cells. Unfortunately, these lore rooms don't do much in answering any previous questions, instead only raising new ones. So let's take a look at these lore rooms and go over some of the questions they raise so we can be prepared for what's to come in the future. The first lore room appears in the Undying Shores, an area introduced in the Fatal Falls DLC. After passing a curious emblem on the wall, the Beheaded comes upon a ruined chamber. There are 3 bodies in the room, one riddled with arrows, another with their head smashed in, and the final hanging from a chain by their neck with lacerations all over their body. In the center of the chamber, there's a large rack or table in the shape of a human body that has restraints along the limbs and a domed helmet for the head. Above the rack is a vat that appears to have contained a blue liquid of some kind, similar to the kind of liquid seen in vats containing the blue cells that were the subject of the Apostate's research. And running from this vat are pipes that flow to the table where it appears a test subject was injected with this liquid. This was, evidently, some kind of laboratory where the Apostates conducted their experiments. And their last one obviously came to a bad end. But what exactly happened here? And who was the subject the Apostates were experimenting on? Well, it's possible there wasn't anyone on the table at the time of the Apostate's end, as there were soldiers that were making their way through the Undying Shores under orders from the king. They had been sent to find out if the Apostates were the source of the malaise, and to see if they had any information that could help the alchemist find a cure for the disease. Maybe these soldiers just happened to come across this laboratory as they were following their orders, and after dealing with the Apostates inside, collected some notes and journals that they thought could be useful to the alchemist's studies. It could even explain the mark outside the door, as it's reminiscent of the king's crown and the emblem seen on his banners. Maybe that's the symbol the soldiers used to indicate that the room had been cleared. However, leftover pieces of research, a large stack of books, and notes left in a diagram hanging in the back suggest that whoever cleared this room didn't do a very good job collecting information for the alchemist. So the possibility of soldiers being responsible for this room's condition seems unlikely. Besides, the extreme prejudice with which the creatures were eliminated hints that the person that did this had a fierce hate for them, far beyond what an ordinary person would have. Which gives rise to another possibility. Perhaps this is where the king was transformed into the Beheaded. There are references in the game to the Beheaded being a bloodthirsty, violent being. So it would make sense that upon taking his new form, the king would immediately lash out, attacking and killing those around him. This violence could have been further fueled by the king's known contempt for the Apostates, explaining why these creatures were executed so brutally. But the Practice Makes Perfect update notes say that these lore rooms are meant to hint at things to come, and the king's true identity as a homunculus, one that the Apostates were likely involved in creating, albeit indirectly, isn't exactly new, having been covered in the Rise of the Giant update as well as the Fatal Falls DLC. So what could this new lore room be hinting at? Well, just because this isn't the process that made the king a homunculus, doesn't mean it wasn't a process that made someone else a homunculus. After all, the various iterations of the homunculus that wandered the Undying Shores are evidence that the Apostates tried this experiment several times. So maybe this lore room hints there's another homunculus that was successfully created. One larger and more savage than the Beheaded. Maybe that's the figure depicted in the large relief in the mausoleum occupied by the Scarecrow. Maybe that's who resides in the mysterious lighthouse off the coast of the Undying Shores. Maybe the reason no one can use the ships to flee the island the realm rests on is because the homunculus residing within the lighthouse destroys any craft that sails past it. Whatever the case may be, it seems clear that the Beheaded will come face to face with whatever was responsible for the destruction of that chamber in the near future. While exploring the halls of High Peak Castle, the Beheaded will come across the next new lore room, and this one contains a reference to a figure only mentioned one other time in the game, the Queen. Adorning the wall of a ruined room are two grand portraits. One of the king holding a single pink rose, and another of the queen holding a bouquet of red roses with a crown of roses around her head. Interestingly, while the portrayal of the king has been damaged and droops off the wall, the image of the queen is immaculate and perfect, free from the chaos that has thrown instruments across the ground and covered the walls and curtains with a strange, tenuous growth, almost as if she had been deliberately spared. The state of this room gives rise to many questions. Was it by chance that only the king's portrait suffered from the chaos that consumed this room? Or was his image deliberately attacked? Maybe by someone that was a vassal or sympathizer of the queen. If so, were they upset at the king for the brutal actions he took to deal with the malaise? Or was there something else that happened between the king and the queen that the person was upset about, to the point of lashing out at his likeness? Was it only one person that was responsible for tearing up this room? Or were there multiple? After all, when the Beheaded investigates some of the wreckage, they seem to suggest that multiple people fled from the room at once, which caused its messy state. Given the number of instruments in the chamber, maybe it was a group of court musicians that fled the castle in a panic when it started its fall to the malaise, cursing the king for his behavior as they left, but leaving the portrait of the queen alone, sparing her from their wrath since they believed she wasn't responsible for the tragedy that had befallen them. Whatever the case may be, it appears that whoever left this room, whether it was one person or many, also took weapons from a display on the wall. A bow, something that looks like could be a pair of curved blades, and what looks to be a large maul. The interesting thing to note about these weapons is that they are the same ones that could have caused the injuries to the apostates seen in the room of the Undying Shores. Did the people that fled the room in the castle actually leave in a hurry so they could rush to the Undying Shores to rescue the person being experimented on there? Were they successful, or did they fail in their attempt? Could the person they were trying to rescue have actually been the queen? Maybe when the Beheaded comes face to face with whoever was in that chamber, it won't be a single person, but 3 warriors. One wielding a bow, one a pair of blades, and the last using the maul. And the Beheaded will have to find a way to overcome a 3-on-1 fight to continue their journey. Or maybe those 3 warriors will only be guardians to the real challenge, the person that was experimented on in that room. A new final boss waiting at the pinnacle of the lighthouse, where the Beheaded will battle them in the conclusion of the 3rd DLC, and perhaps Dead Cells as a whole. All incredibly exciting possibilities, and there are even more questions that still stand to be answered. What's with all the webby goop in the castle chamber? Is it related to the malaise in some way? Did someone become a monster in this room and leave all this residue? Or was it something else? There are also a few roses dotted around the room, something that typically wouldn't attract much attention, except there's a character in the game, the gardener, who's closely associated with roses. And interestingly, that association with roses seems to extend to the queen as well. Was there something going on between the gardener and the queen, as some people seem to think? Is that why the king's portrait was damaged and the queen's was spared? Due to some kind of jealous rage of the gardener? If the two were involved with each other, how long had it been going on? How much did the king know about? How did it begin? Maybe that's the gardener's connection to the pagans. Maybe the reason he traveled to the fractured shrines after he was infected with the malaise, believing that he would be recognized by the pagans, was because this was where he originally met the queen, who's hinted to be a ruler of those that dwell there. Maybe he knew her in a time before she was the queen of the realm, where she was just the queen of the pagans. And this is where the gardener met her people and where their relationship started. One that continued after the queen of the pagans was taken away by the king to be his wife. Or maybe it's nothing like this at all. Ultimately, we're just gonna have to wait until that third DLC pack is released, which will hopefully answer all of these questions. If you have any questions or theories of your own, feel free to share them, as you've probably thought of something that I haven't even considered yet, and I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer them. But I'm done here for now, so until next time, thank you for watching and see you later.